Is that it now? Yeah. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we just get going, I just want to remind those that have attended via the Zoom session that we're going out live at the moment via Facebook, but your cameras and mics are off. And also we'll be recording this session afterwards, so it will be available. We've also just kept some time at the end for questions, and you can ask questions via the Zoom and the Facebook chat function. So my name is Samantha Walker, and I'm the Museum Curator at the St Andrews Preservation Trust. So just thank you all for joining us on the session or watching live on the day that we launch our digital map of the Ladyhead. For anyone that's not familiar with the Preservation Trust, we were founded in 1937, primarily to preserve the historic character of St Andrews. And over the decades, this has really resulted in the development of a historic archive and the opening of an independent social history museum in 1982. And for those that don't know, the museum is located at 12 North Street in the heart of the Ladyhead area that we'll explore today. The Trust received funding from Museums Galleries Scotland, who are the national sector body for museums in Scotland, in the autumn of last year to create this map. Last year, with the reduction in visitor numbers, we really wanted to make our collections more accessible, particularly those collections that provided historical context to the museum and its geographical situation. We wanted to develop the map to a point where we could engage with the wider public and start to curate it as a community. So we hope that following this event, more people will come forward with content, information, and memories. I'd just like to introduce you to some of the people that are on the session today. So we have 3 of our volunteers who worked on the map. Amy Hart joined the Trust at the beginning of this project in November 2020. I've only actually met Amy remotely, so hopefully we can meet at the museum soon. We also have Sebastian Taylor. Sebastian is a recent physics graduate of the University of St Andrews. They're starting a master's in September for curatorial practice in Glasgow, and they're very excited to have volunteered with the St Andrews Preservation Trust on this project. We are also joined by Mary Edens-Maccabee, who I have met in person. Mary Edens is a student at the University of St Andrews and has been running the museum's Flashback Friday posts on social media, and more recently got involved in adding content to the map. We're also joined by Neil Curran-Dobson of St Andrews Harbour Trust, who will be speaking about the Fitzroy Barometer at 35 North Street, and also our colleagues Dr. Alan Miller and Dr. Ian Oliver at the University of St Andrews. The title of the event is A Sense of Place, the Ladyhead and Beyond. And this is really because as we started to develop the map, it became clear that while the focus of the map was to be on the Ladyhead area, this strict geography meant that some key sites surrounding what was known as the Ladyhead would not be included. The area of the Ladyhead is generally thought of as the east end of North Street, starting from North and South Castle Street. But for the purposes of the map, we have included Fisher Housing to the west of North and South Castle Street, and then also other key sites like the Kirkhill areas at the harbour, which is really the area of the oldest settlement of St Andrews. And according to our records, and this is the information I have, the name the Ladyhead, or the Ladyhead, as it was probably more likely to be referred to, comes from a building that once stood in the cathedral grounds called Our Lady's Chapel. But I've just read that in our records, so if anyone wants to correct me, that's absolutely fine. The sites on the map have really relied on archive material being available in the Trust archive, and while 21 sites have been established so far, we do hope that over time, with new material and information, the map can be developed. As we have such an extensive photographic collection, the map largely links to this material. However, we have included oral archive clips and 360 images of the sites as they look today. So moving on to the map, if we just can have a look at the slides, Ian, that would be really useful. The map itself, I can put in the chat the link to how you can access this. So the map is available on the Preservation Trust website. We have created just a small link here a tiny URL, Ladyhead URL, so that you can just access it without having to go through the site, but it is available on the Preservation Trust website also. When you're on the map, you'll basically find that you can click on the pointers to open up different sites. So when you click on a pointer, you'll find that the site should load, and there'll be a media button. And if you click on that, it'll then load a new screen that will show you the media that you can get to. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can click on content, and that will bring up a list of media to look at that links to that specific site. And then on the right-hand side, there's also a more information option that loads a caption. The slides don't show it very well, so maybe we can just have, I don't know if at the moment we can have a look at the map, if that's easy to do, or I can share my screen to look at the map. Oh yeah, Ian's got it here. So this is basically on the left there. That's the list of media that's available to look at. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, there's just a more information tab that you click on, and it should bring up an image caption. And it also references the photo number for the photo in our collection. So I think it is a fairly easy map to navigate and to work your way around the sites. And yeah, you could just click through those images, and you can also zoom in on the photographs to look at some of the detail, which has actually been really fascinating. It's not something that we've done a lot of, so I was spending quite a lot of time today zooming in and out of photos and procrastinating quite a bit looking at some of the sites. So yeah, this is essentially what it looks like. So what we're going to do now is, I don't know, Alan, if you just want to say a bit about the map, because I've probably not covered much of any of the technical detail whatsoever, but just really how people use it. So I don't know if you want to say a bit about that. You're just still on mute, sorry.
I thought that was a very good description of the map. I think that one of the things that we've been doing in Smart History and also in the university is trying to develop archive systems so we can put images into an archive with metadata, but then to be able to then kind of generate from that interactive maps and galleries and timelines. And this is and I think it's a nice example of that, because you've really got some great images. I think one of the things about St Andrews and photography is it's one of the first places to really take photography seriously. So there's some really great images about St Andrews dating back a fair amount of time. And I think it's just amazing the amount of work that has gone into kind of locating those and putting them up and putting up the metadata and putting them up to the map. So I'm really interested to hear your volunteers speaking about what they've done to achieve that, because I think it is it looks quite simple, but I think it's great to have simple things that people can interact with and so on. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, the photographs, that's one of the things that's just been amazing to go through the collection. About 75% of the collection has been digitized, so there's still a bit to go, and there's some photographs actually that we would like to include on the map, but it's just in terms of access, it's been quite difficult these last few months. So again, that's something that we can look at in terms of digitizing the collection and getting more content on there. But talking about volunteers, I think that's a good point to just move on to one of our volunteers, Amy Hart. So she's just going to talk about some of the sites that she's been working on and things that have interested her. So over to Amy.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to talk about my personal favorite picture, and also some of the most interesting parts that I learned about the map. So firstly, to talk about my favorite picture from the virtual map that I researched, it's shown here on the slide, and the photograph was taken at Castle Sands, and it shows the shipwreck of a large vessel, which is most likely considered to be called the Merlin. The ship sank in 1881 during stormy weather while carrying cargo, and sadly, all 11 crew members were killed. The reason I like this photo, not only because it's a very dramatic and striking photograph to see such a catastrophe so close to the town and so close to the beach. The poem, which is taken from the Courier, says here, their watery graves were so close to view. But to me, the most significant thing about this photograph is what it represents in terms of St. Andrew's history. While researching the history of the fishing community in St. Andrews during the 19th and 20th century, there were a lot of stories from different newspapers talking about different deaths and tragedies that took place while fishing. And it just reminds you of the human cost of the fishing industry and how dangerous life could be for those fishermen who were just making a living to support their family and their communities. So in a way, these photographs really do serve to memorialize and commemorate those from the past, and as a way of keeping the history alive and the individuals who lived and work here alive in some way. So the gravestone for the 11 sailors that were killed during this shipwreck can be found in the St. Andrew's Cathedral Cemetery. And in a way, photographs like this that are accessible on the map are similar to gravestones in some ways, as they mean that we can remember and honor those in the past. Doing research into these fishing families was also really eye-opening to me in tracing the families and the lives of those who lived and worked in the community. So on the next slide, you'll see a photograph of a woman called Joanne Clark on the steps of her home at 11 South Castle Street. So the building was built around the late 17th and early 18th century. And Joanne was known as quite a character within St. Andrews. She was quite well known. She came from a well-established fishing family, and she would sell fish around Market Street in a barrow. She would also wear traditional fisherwomen's clothing, which you can see in the photograph. It was very kind of bright and kind of unusual clothing, but she was also known for her wit and her sense of humor. And she was one of the people that I researched while looking into the map. There was a newspaper that was written in 1926, an article that was written by a young American student who visited the town and described in detail different aspects of Joanne's life and her character. And it was really interesting to read about her because in many ways it's like a snapshot of a particular time in history, a really specific time and place. Joanne was known as the last of the fishwives because when she died in 1927, by that point, the fishing industry in St. Andrews was already into decline. So she kind of symbolized the traditional fisherwoman in some ways through the way that she worked and the way that she dressed. And I think she is kind of representative of these kind of hardworking, well-established families that lived and worked in the Ladyhead area. So being able to put a name and a face to these houses that you pass by on the street every day was really intriguing. And it's like these human aspects of the map that really makes it so important, because it's a way to make connections to the past. So when we remember individuals like Joanne, in some ways we're helping to preserve the culture and the traditions of the fishing families. And it also shows how St. Andrews has evolved over time in terms of the function and the structure of the town, and also how the legacies of the fishing community still impacts the town today. That's probably the most significant thing that I learned about St. Andrews while researching for this particular map, is how distinct the fishing community was within the town. They had their own culture and superstitions and spaces that they inhabited. So, for example, you have on the next slide, a photograph of the East End Infant School, which was originally located in Gregory Place. It's a photograph on the left, but it was closed in 1957. It was primarily a place to educate the children from these fishermen's families. And then you have other places like Society Square, which was accessed through North Castle Street. And it consisted of 3-story tenement buildings that surrounded a courtyard, and it was kind of like a social hub for those in the fishing community. It was a place for social gatherings and also for fisherwomen to carry out domestic work. And the fact that the fishing families occupied such a specific space within St. Andrews that often was separate from other townsfolk and maintained these old traditions was really interesting to me. And again, it shows how much of the town has evolved over the past 100 years. And the way that these buildings and these spaces evolved over time, it also shows the social and cultural transformations within society in general. So, for example, the decline of the fishing industry and also the increasing significance of the university and tourism within the town. So even though the fishing community isn't what it was within St. Andrews, the buildings themselves and these photographs and the stories really does help to keep the community alive even now. So I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thanks so much, Amy. I really love that photograph of Joanne, actually. It was one that we came across, I think, a few years ago, but it's tiny. It's such a really small photograph. So it's great to have it digitized because you can see a lot more detail, and you can see quite a lot of detail on the map as well. So we're now going to hear from Sebastian. I'll pass you over. Thank you.
Hello. I joined this project late last year. I think I'm one of the volunteers that has not met Samantha in person, but I was in St. Andrews last year, finishing up my undergrad, and it's been really interesting working on this project. My kind of purview was to go through and sort the different pictures on a spreadsheet of North Street. So going through and highlighting which pictures had enough information, which pictures had clear images, and flag them according to their usefulness for the map. This was really interesting because there was all of this, all of the different architecture and different images and time periods as well that the pictures come from in the archive. And so one piece that stood out to me as well was this picture of the St. Andrews fisherwomen of 50 years ago. And this is an excerpt from a newspaper clipping, though the date of the newspaper clipping wasn't included with the image, you can kind of work backwards with years, which is going to be a recurring theme. And so it shows that the St. Andrews fisherwomen attending the London Fisheries Convention, which took place in 1883 down in London, and it would have been a really large event. So it's really exciting to see this this staged studio shoot. And because it was done in 1883, we can work forward and assume that the paper was published around in the 1930s. And so here, this picture was really helpful, not just because of the very clear image it gives of the fisherwomen's faces and their traditional clothes, but it also compared to some other pictures that have been donated or are part of the archive, it has the placement of the women along with their names attached. So having standing Mrs. Hutchinson, Mrs. Cross, Mrs. Henderson, and then sitting Mrs. Phillip, Mrs. Chisholm, and Mrs. Fenton, this means that we can now put faces to the names. So in some of the pictures, when you have a picture of these fisherwomen candidly working out in the street, as you'll see in the next slide, you start to see it's quite difficult to identify who is who. And even if you have names on them, identifying features such as clothes also vary, because of course for the fishing convention, they were in, as you can tell, a quite different clothing. It was a little bit clearer, a little bit louder, a little bit more traditional, a bit closer to what we might call the red shirt school of photography, or a less cynical version of it would be this idea that they were dressing up to go to this convention that would have been such a huge thing. And so here we see Mrs. Lorimer and Mrs. Chisholm, circa 1900. And this is taken on North Street, so was one of the pieces that I reviewed as I went through the photos for North Street. And you can see them weaving creels on the wide pavements of North Street. Already you can see it's very surreal to go into these archives and see the town devoid of cars, see public spaces such as roads and sidewalks used for work. This is really cool as well. This angle is that you can see the Ladyhead barometer in the background. And as a former student of St. Andrews, this is some place that I've walked past 1,000 times, and learning through the archive, it was really cool to suddenly start learning more about these pieces that I took for granted when walking by. And so Mrs. Chisholm was visible in the first photo and is visible here, sitting on the right. If we go into the next slide, we'll do another recomparison of faces as well. So this photo was entitled Busy Hands. And here we have in the center, Mrs. Kirk, on the left, Mrs. Corstorphine, on the right, Mrs. Waters, and seated we have Mrs. David Fenton. And one of the reasons I bring this picture up, other than its wonderful composition, there are a couple pictures taken around this time, and it's quite fun. You can watch who's weaving what or who's working on what, but it situates them right in front of 21, one of the fishing family flats, houses on North Street. That comes up, and we had quite a few pictures along this block. You had things like the outdoor staircase, which was really indicative of the architecture and the living space. Another piece that this photo was really helpful in conveying was the fact that all of these women might have been referred to by different things in their lives, of course. So here even we have 8 names for 4 people. And some of the people have the same names, whether they were sisters or whether they married into a family. And so if we go on to the next slide, please. We have the final picture here, fisherwomen baiting their lines. We see again Mrs. Fenton, Mrs. Corstorphine, Mrs. Kirk, and Mrs. Waters in a picture that you could have more difficulty identifying their faces. As you can see, it was taken probably around about the same time as Busy Hands from a different angle, because we've got that 21 marker for a place. It was such a lovely time going through these and working for these. I did a little bit of research trying to figure out where the different women lived and what their full names were, and putting it down was extremely hard. This due to their names being different, this due to the photography and the nature of the work, making it quite hard to tell things such as age. So when going into census records and trying to sort people from their from when they lived and their age, it often got really muddied. So it brought this whole new appreciation for people who keep very clear records. It really makes you think about how nowadays, how do we leave a paper trail? How are people going to remember some narratives that happened today? And so it was really exciting to go through this and uncover some of the feminine history of St. Andrews. in much the same way. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I think it is great that you did a lot of detective work and trying to look in the faces and figure out who people were. And we have had quite a few comments here from people that are saying that's a family member. I have photographs of family members outside 21. So it would be great to connect with people, you know, and also just find out more about these women, because often we do have names, but it doesn't say, you know, like in the centre or on the right hand side or on the left. So it's never always clear. But that's been one great thing about the project, is actually improving our own knowledge of the collections, and finding out more about the people that are in our photographs. So thank you so much, that was great. We're now going to hear from Mary Edens about reviewing the oral archive to discover some of the material that's been linked to the map there. So Mary Edens.
Hi guys, as Sam introduced me, I'm a student currently at the university, and I've been helping out mostly with some of the social media that the museum has up, but I also started to work on the map as well in, I guess, the fall. So we've been working on that for a couple of months now, and I know we're all really excited to get to share what we've been working on with all of you. So there are a couple of different things that I have been working on. The first one that I'm going to talk about are the 360 images that we've just started doing over the past week. So we have been out around the town with a 360 camera, trying to get some good shots of places that would be already on our Ladyhead map. So on the link that Sam showed you earlier, on some sites, there are obviously the photos from our archives and some art collection pieces as well. But hopefully we are going to get up these 360 images that we've been taking. And as Sam said as well, this is a project that we're going to be continuously working on and maintaining. So in the next weeks and months, hopefully we'll be able to get some more images up. So always check back in to see what we've added and the content that we're also putting up. So yeah, right there, that's Kirkhill. And we're going to keep going around town and taking more of those. So look out for that. The other thing that I worked on, we have oral archives at the museum. Back in 2016, several people from town were interviewed who had lived here since their childhood. And those interviews were recorded and also transcribed. So when we were starting to think about things that we could also include on the map, we decided to go through those transcripts and see if there were any clips that we could add on the map that would have firsthand accounts of some of the locations that we're including. So one of the women who was interviewed was Anne Morris, and you can see on the left, that's her and her family. She's up at the very top of the screen as a little girl. So she, her and her family moved into 6 Balfour Place in the late 40s. Just after the restoration. So you can see on the left the background of Balfour Place. And then you can also see on the right, over where the inner harbor is, Balfour Place in the background with the St. Andrews lifeboat in the front. And Balfour Place is one of the locations that I worked on the map. And there are a lot of really great photos and pieces of art on the map that you can go see as well. But right now we're going to play a clip from Anne Morris's interview that we found. So here's a piece of the oral archive where she's talking about her life when she lived at Balfour Place.
So then Balfour Place, well, that magical childhood, because of course the houses had been George Bruce's timber yard, And so the houses abutted the water, and so the Kinnesburn actually flowed underneath our kitchen window, sitting room window, bedroom windows, and it was absolutely lovely. And the tide went in and out, and it would just, I have so many happy memories of that. One in particular is that on sunny days, we never closed the curtains, of course, and on sunny days, when I wakened up, the water was the sun was striking the water, and it was dappling on the ceiling, so there was this lovely pattern on the ceiling. Also, of course, terrible storms down there, you know, absolutely dreadful. My father had a great time trying to build a good garden. Surrounding the house, of course, were quite a lot of industrial things. There was the gasworks, which was further along at the harbour. There was the laundry opposite, Woodburn Laundry, and there was also a noise coming, the various noises. I was saying to you recently that I felt that my childhood had been much quieter. You know, the town was quieter because, of course, there wasn't the volume of traffic. But there were many other kind of noises. And for example, at 8 o'clock every night, a siren went off, which was placed on the roof of the Borough School, and that had been a curfew. And that continued for well into the 60s, I think. And then, of course, the town church bells, 100 bells, the curfew bells. So all of these sounds were around. And there was also one which my brother reminded me of yesterday about the North Car lightship foghorn. And he called it, when he was a very young child, the moo horn, because he hated it with this horrible noise. And of course it was always when it was foggy, so it was very eerie, you know, to have this fog. And then of course with all the coal fires we had smog rather than, you know, the clear air we have now.
So that's just a little clip of what we have on the map. There are several locations currently that have oral archive clips, and they show up on the bottom when you click on a location, so you can easily navigate and listen to some of those firsthand accounts. And I just think, as someone who's not lived here for very long, just a couple of years, there's been a very steep learning curve for me just about town history, and specifically the fisherfolk community. And the oral archives in particular were very interesting to me just because you could see how in the childhoods of many of these people who were being interviewed, how strong the fishing industry was within their life. And then by the time you're hearing about where they live now, where they may have been throughout their lifetime, the changes that they've seen throughout town, you can hear the obvious shift away from the fishing industry into more of, I guess, the tourism that St. Andrews is now known for, and just hearing how that has affected locals and people who really saw it move as it was happening. So I've really enjoyed working on this project, and I'm excited to keep going through things, keep adding, so that anytime you open it, there's something new for you to see. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Marie Edens. Thank you. Yeah, we've got some of our oral archive clips on there at the moment. The Trust actually does have quite an extensive oral archive collection, but some of these recordings were done maybe 30, 40 years ago, and so we're a bit uncertain about the copyright and the permissions in using them, but we knew with these clips that we were able to use them, so perhaps over time we will be able to add more. Because I do think they add quite a nice personable element to the map, especially when you hear someone's voice. It is fantastic. So now we are going to move on, and we are going to speak to Neil Cunningham-Dobson. So Neil's from the St Andrews Harbour Trust, and I'm really interested to hear what he's going to have to say about the Fitzroy Barometer. So over to you, Neil.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about an area and a piece of equipment that's close to my heart in the Ladyhead, and that's the Fitzroy Barometer. I've been at sea for 47 years, and weather is an important part of my life. For most of us, it's these days it's online, on your mobile phone, internet, etc. I prefer just to look out the window or open the door and go outside and have a look. However, weather forecasting is important, especially to fishermen. It's their livelihood. Storms can mean that the boats don't go out to sea. Storms can also take lives. And this gentleman here is one of my all maritime heroes. And this man here is Vice Admiral Robert Fitzroy. He was born in 1805, and like a lot of people, he went and joined the Royal Navy, got a commission, was a good officer, eventually sailing with Charles Darwin on his many expeditions. And Robert was very keen on weather. He was also very keen on keeping records of weather and seeing how weather could be used to make forecasts. And eventually, he retired in 1850 from the Royal Navy, and ended up in the Board of Trade, and he formed the early, what is now the Met Office. He was the pioneer of the Met Office. From all the records he kept, he tried to develop scientific instruments that would help people around the coast, especially fishermen, report the weather and forecast the weather. And really, weather forecasting, we can trace it back to Neolithic times when our ancestors built their henges, etc., lined them up with suns and stars and planets, and they made predictions about the seasons. And then it wasn't really until the 18th, 19th century when we had the barometer being invented, Celsius and Fahrenheit temperatures being prevented, that using a combination of these instruments, it could help forecast the weather. But for centuries, and still today, we still like to use the old ways of doing the weather. Red sky at night, red sky in the morning, or one that I use at sea a lot, a mackerel sky and mare's tail. Make tall ships carry low sails, which basically, if you see that pattern of the sky, bad weather's on the way and you would take sail down. And I still use that fairly regularly, as long with the Shepherd's Delight. So what about our barometer then? Well, Vice Admiral Fitzroy was so concerned about the loss of life around the coast, with storms, fishermen, fleets being taken away by bad weather, that he tried to convince the scientific world that they should invent a barometer, a marine barometer, fairly sturdy one that could be read easily, and he would hope to give these out to all the fishing communities around the British coast. He laboured hard at this, and if you remember, in Victorian times, here he was in a government department, the Board of Trade, which would keep meticulous records of everything that went on and all that they did. And there he was trying to work with basically the fishing community, of which the majority were illiterate, couldn't read or write, and they were concerned about, my God, we need to know what the weather's doing. We need to know that we can go out and not get killed at sea. So he managed to convince the scientific world and the government and some barometer manufacturers, and he designed his Fitzroy Marine Barometer. And it really wasn't until 1858 that he managed to get these built and then sent out to many stations around the UK. He used Scotland first in his trial because Scotland had worse weather than England at the time. So it wasn't until 1890 that St Andrews got one. Now, this was a good 30 years after his death. Sadly, Fitzroy suffered from depression and he took his own life in 1865. However, his work continued on, that he wanted to save and protect the fishermen of the UK. Normally what would happen is fishing communities would get together if they didn't have a barometer, and they would apply to the government, the Board of Trade, and one would be sent up with instructions. And we were very lucky that St Andrews got one. In fact, I've even got the number of it somewhere. It was the Admiral Fitzroy Marine Barometer, serial number 367815. And it was gifted to the fishermen of St Andrews and built into the corner there, I think 35 North Street, on the corner of North Castle Street there. And it was there for the whole fishing community to see. And it's the perfect spot for it. It was on the corner. If you can imagine, in these days, the houses around there were full of fishing families. They were living in one room, and most of the work was done outside on the streets, where they would come out to talk, socialise, sell their fish, basically get news, talk about the fishing, what the weather's going to do, etc. Luckily enough, they had people that could read or write and could actually read the barometers. And this consisted of a normal marine barometer and a storm glass. And inside the storm glass was camphor oil. And at different temperatures, it goes cloudy, or it goes light, it goes clear. And then from that, you could guesstimate that bad weather was on the way. So normally you would get one of the locals there that could read and write to pass on the information and keep a note of, that's a slide there, and keep a note of what the weather was doing. Obviously, you would go out and have a look at yourself. Weather's all about local knowledge, and St Andrews Bay has its own weather systems. In fact, I always tell people that this corner of the East Look is really Shangri-La. Everywhere else, north and south, gets snow, but St Andrews doesn't. So they were very aware of it. The barometer fitted in the wall there, it's quite interesting because in the bottom right-hand corner, you can't quite see it in the photograph I've got, but if you go up there, you'll see marks carved into the wall from initials, possibly a local fisherman. They also may have sharpened the knives on the sandstone at the side there. And I'm quite surprised that it's still in situ and not been damaged, broken or destroyed, or the building changed. So it's great to have this barometer there. What was important and what comes out of this story more than anything else was that Fitzroy, representing the Board of Trade, meticulous record keepers, government, got together with a bunch of fishermen with the whole aim of protecting lives at sea. And I wish today that our governments were like Fitzroy and the fishing communities to sort out all their issues. The barometer itself was the Preservation Trust fixed it up, and it's now in its present state in the corner there. But if we go to the next slide, here's a picture of them all sitting on the corner there. Now, I would love to name some of these people on here, and I wish that my ancestors was there. My grandmother is a Cunningham, and her grandmother was down at the Royal George, and my grandmother's brothers and sisters all lived in the close, just opposite the gentleman, the right down there. Way in the 60s and the 70s, they were still in there in the fishing communities. What's interesting in this picture, to me, it's one of the greatest pictures of the fishing community here. They obviously came out for this photograph, and they're all standing there. There's young boys there, there's old fishermen there, and it's the dogs that are interesting as well. Obviously, a great part of the fishermen's lives. Of course, many of the fishermen, when they weren't fishing, were caddies and club makers. So you've got that connection as well. Had there not been a harbour here and a fishing fleet, there wouldn't have possibly been all the caddies in the Gulf the way it is now. So I always like to think that it was the fishermen that got it started. So there is also another barometer you might not be aware of. Can we have the next slide? This is on the corner, just before you go down St Gregory's, on the corner of the Cathedral Ward there. To many, it just looks like an old post box, but it's another barometer, not a Fitzroy one. You can see that the long slot there would have been possibly for the storm glass, and the top half would have been for a marine barometer. This was gifted by Alexander Harley Cunningham, and they had a shop, A.G. and Cunningham's, at the West Port. And that's all I basically have found out. And they donated it to it. So they donated it at the same time as the Fitzroy one was still on the corner at the Ladyhead there. So we had two. So if anybody's got any information or knowledge as to why it was gifted and actually what happened to it, the wood's in a bad old state. It'd be lovely to have this redone and have another marine barometer in there. If you go around the coast of Scotland, a lot of the fishing ports, you will come across these types of barometers and clocks at harbours, etc. It might be a new craze that we can start of going to tick them off on a list and learn about the weather, but they still work. That's the thing about them, they still work. You can still go along and read the barometer there and see, oh, it's gone cloudy. As you stand in the rain, you will see that it indeed is cloudy. So there we go with the barometer. That was Fitzroy. He's a bit of a hero, and a lot more should be said about the work that he did to protect the lives of the fishermen in around our coast, and especially in St Andrews. Fishermen in St Andrews historically had a lot of hard times. Centuries ago, fleets were destroyed by storms and lots of lives lost. So it's an important corner of the town, and I love the Ladyhead, and I'm very proud that I have ancestors and family that are there. And I'm really happy that we still have this area, the Ladyhead, today. So seeing this map and be able to click on it was absolutely wonderful. And that picture that I had not seen before of all the fishermen on the corner there is remarkable. So there we go, that's me.
Thanks very much, Neil. That was really great. And you found out more than what I was able to find out about this one. So I've been kind of typing it away to keep a note of that. But yeah, it would be great to find out more about that, because people do mention it and ask what it is. So, but yeah, that was fantastic. And it is a great photo. And I've noticed a couple of people have said, my granddad, third from the left, is a Fenton. And then somebody else's granddad living in the area might be in the photograph. So the great thing is about the map as well is you can zoom in to the photograph. So if people have other photographs of, their grandparents, then they might be able to do comparisons as well and help us to identify the people in the photographs. So that's super. Thank you so much. The next few slides, I was just really going to look at some of the items in the collection that we didn't really know much about, that we have added to the map, and we've been able to kind of find out a bit more about. So this sketch here is titled Feemy, and it's by Malcolm Patterson, who was an art teacher at St Leonard's School. The sketch itself is dated 1921. But we didn't know anything about the sketch apart from that information. So what we were able to do is find out, the other thing actually that did have on the sketch was it said that she lived at Balfour Place, which was really helpful, because then we looked up the census record and we found Euphemia C. Wilson living at Balfour Place in 1911. And the census record was able to tell us that at that time, she was 54. And so with this sketch being 1921, I think it was reasonable to say that she was 64 at that time. Her occupation was actually listed as a gatherer of shellfish. And for me, that just really gave me so much more insight into her life and the type of work that she did. Because we know that fisherwomen played an important role in the fishing, and much of their working day was spent baiting lines and looking after the home. But then if they were gathering shellfish, then they would have done that 3-mile walk out to the Eden in all weathers, freezing cold, a 3-mile walk out there, and then with the creels on their back to St Andrews again. So really tough work to do. So to find that out about her in this sketch just really brought that to life for me, to find out what her occupation was. The next photograph, it's one of the few photographs that we actually have of 24 to 26 North Street, and it's of Brown's store. That was really, again, all the information that we had of that. We didn't really know anything about the family prior to their ownership of the shop. But again, we were able to look at the 1911 census, and that told us that David Brown had been a fisherman and he'd lived at the Shore Head, and then he took over the shop in 1922. Because David Brown is quite a common name, we actually used the daughter's name, Letty. So we started searching Letitia as a formal name, and that's how we managed to find them. But it's a really lovely photograph. The shop now is North Point Cafe. So I'm sure a lot of students will recognise it because it's always a very busy place. So yeah, it was great to just find out a bit more, and I would be interested to find out more about that family as well and how long they had the shop for. I'm not too sure about that yet. And then the final photograph that I had never seen before, actually, that is in our collection, is this one from the Kirkhill, and it was titled Joe the Tank. So I started looking through newspaper articles about this, and was able to find out that Jo was originally named the Adventuress. She was gifted to the town of St Andrews in 1919 in recognition of the large sums that had been raised in war loans. The tank apparently had been driven from the goods station at the links up Pilmer Place and along North Street, and then down Gregory Place to be manoeuvred into place at the gun platform at the edge of the cliffs at the Kirkhill. And the newspaper reports say that the nose of the tank points defiantly out to the North Sea. So you could just about see that in the background there, actually. What we also found out from the newspaper articles that the tank actually sat there until 1929. But the newspaper articles really say that there was a lot of complaints from residents. They felt it was very unsafe. There wasn't any railings at all. It was just a tank basically hanging off a cliff edge. There were fears that children might play around the tank, and also worried about the stability of the cliffs below. So again, really great to find out the context behind this photograph. Just we really knew nothing about it other than the caption. And just to me, I just can't ever imagine a 32-ton tank at the Kirkhill. And yeah, Neil's just mentioned there also about the turret light on the cathedral wall. I think we do mention that briefly on the map. There's a really great photograph that just shows the wall, and you can see where that turret light would have been. And there's a couple of great photographs of the harbour, actually, that you can kind of just see it in the distance, but you need to know what you're looking for to actually identify it. So yeah, these were just a few photographs that I just wanted to point out that I found particularly interesting. But we've still got, a lot of things to find out about our collection. These photographs have so many stories in them, and we've got, over 150 on the map and over 12,000 in the archive. So finding out the context of these photographs just really brings them to life. So on that note, I would just like to say, when you are exploring the map and having a look, if you have information or any other content, please do get in touch. I think my email address will be at the end of these slides, so it would be great to hear from anyone that has any further information. So just before we end the session, I think Sam Ross has been looking at some questions, and Alan's been looking at some questions as well. So I guess we could open it up to questions now. I know that I've been able to see some, but I've not really read them all. So yeah, have you got any questions, Sam?
Really helpfully, Alan's actually posted all of the comments from Facebook into the Zoom, which is great. So the only question that came up to me one that you might want to address was the tech that you used to put this together. And the other from the same person, Where, was asking what is the source and meaning of the Ladyhead area?
I was Fishergate before, and I think the original fishing families were all moved from the harbour. When they built the cathedral, they decided to throw the fishermen out of the harbour area and down there, and they all started up there at Fishergate at that end of the town. And I would say it's probably related to the church at the top of the Kirkhill there, or the Ladyhead in there. That's probably
Yeah, that was a note that I had, like in some sort of research papers, but that was the first time at reference I'd came across it, and it was just like a handwritten note in a sort of research file. So yeah, but it was the chapel within the cathedral grounds.
You would think it would be kept Fishergate because there used to be the Fisher Cross in the middle of the road, just down, probably down towards, further down the street. The Fish Cross was there, and that's where they had
between like Union Street and South Castle Street, kind of halfway.
Aye, down that way.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that would be explain why it was Fishergate, fish, and having the cross there. But once the cross went away and stuff like that, then it got the Ladyhead. Maybe it's got to do something to do with a white lady. You never know.
And the other question was about the tech. I think that would be
the tech that you used. Yeah.
Definitely for Alan.
Well, it was the tech we use is a sort of archive which is connected to forms for inputting data, and also connected to maps and galleries and timelines for being able to look at the data. We developed it as part of a project called Cine, and also with Smart History Limited. It's made up of open source, freely available components such as something called Omica, something called Leaflet, and International Image Interoperability Framework Galleries, IIIF. And so I don't know how you found using it, Samantha. I mean, we're always looking for people to test it out on, and we're always grateful to get feedback on how it went in order to improve it. I'm very impressed with yourself and the volunteers who persevered with this framework, and I think as a result of what you've done, we've managed to improve it as we've gone along.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve, I think, because we did have a couple of training sessions, and then there were times where I kind of thought I'd done the right thing uploading it, and then we obviously hadn't, and I was like, wait, I'm doing this wrong. So it did take, but it's like anything new, isn't it? Any new skill to learn, it kind of is a bit of trial and error. So but I think it is fairly straightforward for, you know, the user to use. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to access something and you're not really getting into the right bit. So there's another question came up there, I think.
Yeah, one question from Colin McLeod, who asks, what are the future plans to add more information to the Ladyhead map or to extend coverage to other parts of St Andrews?
I think for us at the moment, our remit at the museum certainly is to really focus on the Ladyhead area, because the museum's situated in the area. We're really in a prime position to talk about that community, and there's such a rich history in that area. There's actually so much to talk about, and initially we had kind of a list of all the sites we wanted to go through, and then we just kept finding more and more and more information. You know, you could just walk a couple of steps and there's just all this history and information there. So I think there's still development work to do on the Ladyhead side of things. But, you know, it is very much usable at the moment. You can go around it. Ideally, with the resources and more people involved. I think it would be fantastic to extend it. You know, there are some really interesting sites in St Andrews beyond the Ladyhead, and particularly connecting sites that involve the community that once lived at the Ladyhead. So yeah, perhaps looking at, you know, some of the areas that they would have been involved in where they wouldn't have necessarily lived, like maybe at the Eden or something like that. I've got some great photographs of the fishermen at the Eden as well. So, Neil, did you have something?
I think it's good to do the Ladyhead. A lot of people forget the true significance of the fact that we have a harbour at St Andrews and its maritime development. And a lot of what goes on in the town today is because there was a harbour at St Andrews, and it was trading successfully, and it had a group of people that had fishing as full-time and part-time, and got into the other trades like golf and caddying and various other things, and working at the university at the town. We're fairly unique in that, and to still have this area off the town. And as you say, every building along down that's round the streets there has a maritime story connected with it, not just from the barometers, but just from the people itself. Even down next to the Scout Hall, Coast Guard's house there. Look up at the top and you'll see the anchor on the drain pipes that are still painted there, all that. But we've got a huge history, maritime history here, and it's all connected, and it's what makes St Andrews not just the home of golf or the oldest university in the town. And it's certainly a great starting point for all the families. Those pictures, I mean, that picture of the people outside the Ladyhead on the corner there of all the fishermen is just wonderful. I'd love to know why that picture was taken. There must have been a reason. To see the dogs, the type of dogs that they had, to see the young people, even just to see how their clothing was, all sort of showed that you know what the community of St Andrews was about at that time, and it was centred around the fishing community and the harbour itself.
Yeah, I think certainly in the immediate future, that'll be a focus for us, because also like our collection has such a strong focus on the area, you know, because of where the museum is located. People have tended to donate anything that relates to that local area to us. So it seems kind of a shame to have these images, you know, and not have people being able to access them, especially with, you know, lockdown and people not being able to come to the museum. I think it is a really good way to show these photographs, but also within the context of the actual local area, you know, and you could walk around and see these places and have a look at the map and see what they were like in the past. And it is a simple concept, but you know, there's just something really nice about it, and you don't have to. You know, St Andrews hasn't changed that much, so you can in many ways easily identify these places. I do say that, although some of the numberings of the buildings were tricky to figure out for a while, because the numbers have obviously been changed. So that was a bit tricky, and some buildings have gone, but largely, you know, the streets have stayed the same, and you can identify key sites there. So it'd be great to build it up.
It's a great resource to be able to sit on a cold day or what am I going to do with the kids? Go on there and plan a little walk. Get them to stand there, click it open, click and look at that. That's great. That's bringing the past to life again. You know, that's better than buying a guidebook. That's better than following someone with a flag. Follow me and I'll tell you about this. You know, tourism and the way that we learn history is all changing, and it's about making that journey of exploration yourself into it. And it's just a wonderful, simple tool that's great to walk down that area. And even, you know, for a lot of dads that say, yeah, I'll tell you all about this, you can click it open, you know. So some of the local worthies now have got the right information at their fingertips about the history of the town. So it's great. I think it's the future of how you can create tours or walks or take your kids on something and say, let's go to St Andrews today and find out about the students, history of the students, or the harbour, or the golf, or anything in the town. So yeah, I think it's wonderful. I think it should be promoted as much as it can. It's great.
And more to come on it as well. So
Great job by all.
we've probably just got a bit of time for one more question, and then because we're after 7, so we're hoping this will be around an hour. So
Yeah, we've got one question in the chat actually. Is it going to be available as an app? Which is an excellent question.
I just wanted to say, well said, Neil. I thought that was very well put. Agree with you 100%. What do you think, Samantha? Should we do an app?
It depends on how difficult it is to do an app.
Yeah,
I mean, I have used it on a mobile phone. It does actually load up, but I can see how an app would, would be better. Depends on a lot of different things, I guess. I think if the map was going to be expanded to more of a whole town thing, it would be a really big project. I think that would be the time to really look at it in that way. And that, ideally, we would love to do that. It would be great, and it'd be a great thing for the town, because the amount of people that visit the town, and they do want to engage with the heritage of the town. So if we don't do it, somebody else probably will, to be honest.
I think we can do an app version. I don't think it would be. I think we're kind of 80% of the way there with the with the map. So I think we should certainly think about it.
Super. Well, thank you so much, everybody. If you're happy to wrap up, unless anyone else has any final comments or anything at all. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining and helping and talking about your involvement in it all, and sharing your experiences and knowledge. And just to reiterate to everybody who's watching or who's attended the session, if you have anything at all that you'd like to add, or if you want to get involved, please just email us at the museum or give us a call. Be delighted to talk to you. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Alan, Ian, everyone, team. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. There we go.